here in the lovely home in Desert Hot Springs of Paul Krassner and his lovely wife, Nancy, who's sitting over there watching. Paul, thank you for inviting us over here and letting us do this interview with you.
It's my pleasure. They always say that on the news when they interview somebody about the horrors of war, and they describe all the dead bodies, and then say thank you, and you say, oh, my pleasure.
That's right. I've heard that so often. That's right. It always seems so incongruous.
Yeah, exactly.
But incongruous is kind of a watchword for how you kind of describe your humor in a way.
Well, it's a key element to, you know, the difference between what is and what should be is highly incongruous.
Right. Tell us a little. Give us. I'm sure a few people out there may not know of your history as a satirist and a comedian. Do you want to give us a little rundown?
Well, first I want to tell you I'm not Paul Kantner. Because when I came back from the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam, and I went through customs, and the customs guy saw my passport, and he said, hey, you guys made some great music in the 60s. and I said, oh, thank you, yeah, it was a wild time. And he let me go right through. I could have smuggled buds a foot long.
But you're sorry you didn't, though, huh?
Well, no, because the detention would not have been worth it.
No, absolutely.
And besides, when I was in Amsterdam, I was rolling joints on a Bible that they had in the room, and it works really good on Deuteronomy. And
why is Deuteronomy?
I just like the sound of it.
Like, okay, okay.
It has a nice rhythm to it.
All right.
And then I didn't have a Bible here, so I figured I would take it with me. And then I would, you know, when you're innocent, I wouldn't care if the narco dog started going through my luggage and started sniffing the Bible. It would have been worth it.
They would have confiscated your Bible.
Yes.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, anyway, tell us a little about your history as a satirist comedian, when you got started and that whole...
Well, I always had, as a kid, a desire to make people laugh. Because when they laughed, I knew they weren't mad. And I must have done a lot of things to make people mad. And then there were no role models when I was a kid to be a comedian, except like Milton Berle and that brash type that made mean-spirited jokes about their mothers-in-law and their wives and Chinese waiters, all those stereotypes. But my two big influences were Lenny Bruce and Mort Sahl. I edited Lenny Bruce's autobiography, in fact,
really?
How to Talk Dirty and Influence People. And but when I started The Realist, my magazine, which was essentially satirical, although became a sort of a countercultural journal, I published articles like in 1958 when it began about the right to use marijuana, even though I was not a smoker yet. It was just the simple principle of it. I mean, my feeling is that as long as any government can decide arbitrarily which drugs are legal and which drugs are not legal, then anyone serving prison time on a drug offense is really a political prisoner and should be recognized as such.
You know, I take it you probably used marijuana for a while.
You take it correctly.
Yeah. And is it part of your humor? Do you bring marijuana into your humor quite a bit?
Yeah, I try to think sometimes if I would have come up with a particular idea had I not been stoned, and it is sort of like creative fuel. I mean, there are certain ones I know only come from the experience, such as that people really get high from the glue on the rolling papers. And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been a smoker.
Okay.
But it's, you know, when Proposition 215 was passed in California, I said, oh, now there's going to be a lot of 14-year-old kids saying they have glaucoma. Right. But I'm interested in one of the co-authors of Prop 215 was Dennis Perrone, who said that this was not a politically correct statement, but I think it's a morally correct one, and maybe even a medically correct one. He said that all use of marijuana is medical, and in the sense that marijuana can relieve stress, and 95% of disease is exacerbated by stress, I think what he said is true.
Do you feel that your creative process are stimulated when you use marijuana?
It seems to happen. You know, it does. I know that Allen Ginsberg talked about he would meditate before he would write a poem, and it was, and then the words that came to him made their way through that meditation haze, and so those were the ones that really had a force. And my process is similar to that, because there's so much stuff floating around your head. There's so much input coming from all the different kinds of media that it helps clear a path for what really is your priority. In this case, of what words to choose.
Right.
And George Carlin has stated publicly that because he, unlike Lenny Bruce, Lenny used to just create his stuff on stage, whereas Carlin writes everything down and memorizes it, and is very diligent about his craft. And he says that after he's written it, he'll smoke a joint, which helps him fine-tune what he's written.
Yeah.
So
I'm not surprised. This is one of the things that, they talk about how marijuana is supposed to mess your mind up, and in so many cases I've talked to so many people, creative people, and says actually it helps organize my thoughts and makes me see things clearer and put things together in a better way.
Oh yeah, it's just part of the propaganda, because the Partnership for a Drug-Free America was originally founded and funded by the alcohol, tobacco, and pharmaceutical companies.
It still are.
They don't want no stinking competition.
Right.
Why would anybody get Prozac when they can grow marijuana in their window box without the side effects of Prozac, which takes away your depression but gives you suicidal tendencies? Dick Gregory and I once talked about how it might have been so that Abraham Lincoln actually wanted the slaves to go back to Africa.
Right.
And I said, yeah, but you don't talk about that aspect of it. And he said, no, because you have to go with a joke that the audience will accept the premise of. Arianna Huffington has said that too. Why spoil a good punchline with a fact?
But it's always interesting that with marijuana, the stereotypes are always kind of silly, funny stereotypes. Oh, you eat, or you get a little silly, or you laugh a lot, or you forget little things. It's never, the stereotypes are never things like the falling down, stumbling, throwing up drunk, which is the stereotype of a person who drinks alcohol. The stereotypes of people who use pot are always kind of laughable and funny and not particularly threatening.
Oh, well, the statistics, smoking tobacco kills 1,200 people every day. That's just in this country, not counting all the third world countries that we export it to. Whereas marijuana, the worst you can do is maybe raid your neighbor's refrigerator at midnight. But, there is a certain bond and also a certain humor that comes out of the situations. To drop another name, when I smoked once with John Lennon, and it was a combination of marijuana and opium, and he was holding on to the joint, and I asked him, is that just an American expression to bogart a joint from a Humphrey Bogart movie where a cigarette was dangling from his lower lip? Or is it kind of, or did they say that in England too? And he said, with this sly look on his face, well, in England, if you remind somebody to pass a joint, you lose your own turn. And I think he was putting me on, but it was worth it.
Yeah, I'll bet. Wow, John Lennon, incredible. You have really known an awful lot of people during your career and stuff. It's just amazing. I hear.
Well, that's the thing about having a magazine. You can say to somebody, can I interview you? and they know they're reaching a lot of people. Whereas if you were just an individual, you know, they'd say, "I'm sorry, I don't have time."
You're right. I can interview because I say, "Can I do a television interview with you for a TV show?" People say, "Yeah." It kind of blows me.
Oh,
away.
there you are. Yeah, because they want to reach people,
Yeah.
but they don't want to expend their energy on one individual.
Yeah. Right. Do you have any time that kind of just sticks in your mind as one of the most incredible times you ever got stoned?
Just recently, I was in Australia for the Sydney Writers' Festival, and I didn't bring any pot with me, again, because the risk is not worth the tension.
Yeah, sure.
And when I performed in a cabaret there, and after it was over, someone in the audience gave me a package and said, "You'll enjoy this," and it was a couple of books, and it was a very generous packet of pot between them. And so I immediately went out and got a lighter and cigarette papers. They're called, the ones they sold in Sydney were Tally-Ho. And they have a feature that I hadn't seen in Zigzag or any of the others, which is, let's say there are 50 papers in the pack. When you're down to, when you've used 40 of them, there's suddenly a maroon paper that's next, ungummed, and it says, when you only have 10 left, say Tally-Ho. So that's a reminder for people who can't count to 10, I guess.
This is a book that Paul wrote called Pot Stories for the Soul. Can you tell us a bit about this book, Paul?
Well, I wrote several pieces in it, but I compiled and edited it. And the reason I started collecting pot stories was because, as you were saying before, you know, there are these stereotypes. And I thought, well, I don't have those panic attacks that a lot of people have, supposedly. I have fun. I smoke by myself or with a group of people, but it's an enjoyable experience, and it's a kind of a sense of community, and there's not much small talk, and it enhances music, it enhances food, it enhances movies. So I have had these positive experiences, and so does everybody I know virtually. And so I started collecting these stories for people, just what they experienced and observed. It started that they were just going to be funny pot stories, but there were some that were poignant, some that were just bizarre. And there was, and this book was published by High Times. It's available on my website, paulkrassner.com,
Okay.
2 S's. And it won the Firecracker Alternative Book Award and was a selection by the Quality Paperback Book Club.
Oh, really?
Which was gratifying, not because it was my book, but because it shows that they know, they're not doing us any favors, but they know there's an audience for it. And so, you know, let them do the right thing for a different reason. That's fine.
You know, you said there's an audience for it. There's an enormous audience for marijuana, and it's just always amazed me that we're still kind of stuck in this limbo situation with so many people.
Oh, it will be looked at by anthropologists of the future as barbaric times.
Yeah. And because it's so beneficial and so harmless, it's just, you know, you've talked about how many years you've been using it, how many years I've been using it. It hasn't hurt us.
Listen, I'm 74 years old, and but 74 is the new 23. So, you know, so I may be gimpy on the outside, but I seem to be alert on the inside.
Yeah, sure. Marijuana has played an important role in helping me become the person I still am today.
Yeah, it's part of the process. First of all, just using it itself is an act of self-empowerment because there's so much propaganda against it, and you're breaking through. And because of that, it helps you see how other laws are so unjust. And, you know, my mother was concerned when I first started smoking pot. She said it could become a habit. And, you know, I've been smoking pot for 40 years, and it's never become a habit.
More of an avocation.
But actually, I stop for a week at a time, for a month at a time. You know, once in a while, I think, oh, it'd be nice to have a joint now, but it's not, you know, I don't get the shakes.
Right. So what's next for you, Paul? What are you're working on?
My big project is my long-awaited, by me, first novel, and it's about a comedian, a contemporary version of Lenny Bruce, who gets busted for marijuana and goes to prison, and just how such insane priorities of who they arrest and for what, and the sentences they get are just ruinous. You know, just ruining lives by people who have power without compassion.
Yeah, you bet. So that's interesting. After that, are you ever going to write an autobiography?
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Really? Tell us about
Simon and Schuster published it in 1993. It's called Confessions of a Raving Unconfined Nut. Misadventures in the Counterculture. And the phrase came from an FBI poison pen letter. This means that it wasn't on FBI stationery, it was on just an individual in the FBI pretending to be, he signed it, Howard Rasmussen, Brooklyn College, School of General Studies. You know, if you give a detail like that, it has more credibility.
Yeah.
And Life magazine had done a favorable profile of me, so they sent this letter saying to portray Krassner as a social rebel is not correct. He's a nut, a raving unconfined nut. So I figured as long as I said that, I might as well use it for a title.
That's tremendous.
And just recently, I got the rights reverted back to me from the publisher. So I plan to republish it. But bringing it up to date.
Cool. And they can go to your website, paulkrassner.com, and they can get information on your different writings and the whole bit.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, Paul, thank you very much for joining us here on Marijuana, Compassion, and Common Sense. Perhaps we can get you on again sometime in the future and talk a little more.
It would be my pleasure again.
Okay.
Starting with the fact that I knew if I was the only one who had this sense of irreverence, there'd be no hope.